Next week, or maybe the week after, President Putin is traveling to China on February 4th for the opening of the Olympics there, the Winter Olympics, and he's going to be meeting with President Xi and Xi Jinping. And in a recent phone call, President Xi of China supported President Putin's argument that Ukraine must never join NATO. Now, there's a debate going on within foreign policy circles about exactly, what is Russia up to here? And, is it just, Putin is power mad and he's going to go seize some more territory? I don't think that's it. Is it, it's all about NATO? Well, I don't think that's entirely it either, although I think that's a big piece of what's actually going on right now. But this, Gideon Rachman wrote an extraordinary, if you're a Financial Times subscriber, it was the big read over the weekend, and I commend it to you, an extraordinarily deep dive into this. And basically, what he's pointing out is that we are moving back toward a bipolar world. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, that was just 4 years after I had spent the month of November of '86, maybe 5 years, in Beijing. I lived in Beijing. I studied at the Beijing International Acupuncture Institute and Teaching Hospital. It was a roughly 500-bed hospital. I had 3 roommates. I still keep in touch with one of them. He's a psychiatrist, originally from Colombia. I worked at Bellevue for years. He just retired. Pablo is his name. Great guy. And then there were 2 Japanese guys who were doctors who were my 3 roommates. And at the time, China was just dirt poor. I mean, just dirt poor. It cost 3 cents for a really nice meal in Beijing. 3 cents U.S. in 1986. So when the Soviet Union fell in '91, and China was still, essentially a third world country, and so the United States and our allies in Europe basically became the single power in the world. And I think you can build a strong case, and I think Gideon Rachman makes that case, that while we arguably, setting aside Citizens United, we arguably are saying America and Europe and all are really all about democracy. We are supporting democracy in the United States, in Europe, and around the world. And back in the day, there was that conversation about making the world safe for democracy. That was America's mission, right? This from the 90s. But for Russia and China right now, and Rachman points this out, they have a different view of even what human rights are. Chinese media said that Xi told Putin, quote, certain international forces are arbitrarily interfering in the internal affairs of China and Russia under the guise of democracy and human rights. There is a different, China and Russia both have elections. You and I wouldn't call them democratic, but they do. China and Russia both have internal systems that they would call supports for human rights. They have things like our equivalent of Social Security and, healthcare programs and things like that. They're different political systems, and I want to get into a longer rant about that tomorrow, frankly. But the bottom line is that up until recently, when we turned all of our manufacturing over to China, basically through the Reagan, Bush, Clinton, and Bush administrations, China has risen to be a larger economy than us. They may have a larger military than us. A lot of this is unknown. Russia, while their economy is only the size of Italy and they're 1/10 the population of China, Russia has a military that is as formidable as anybody. So, speaking militarily, Russia is, also a major world power, and in many other ways as well, and an ancient society. So what we're seeing here is an alignment of interests between Russia and China for what you might call oligarchy or autocracy. But then that brings us to Ukraine, and Peter Beinart is writing about this in his newsletter today, which is a pretty remarkable piece. He points out that in the late 90s, the Clinton administration was thinking about expanding NATO into Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic. Now, that was just a small beginning of what NATO has done since then. And George Kennan, who is this living legend of American foreign policy, came out and said this would be, quote, a strategic blunder of potentially epic proportions. It would be kind of like shoving the West in the face of Russia. Thomas Friedman, remember Tom, the New York Times columnist? He said it was, quote, the most ill-conceived project of the post-Cold War era. Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the Democrat who was probably the most thoughtful and intelligent member of the U.S. Senate at the time, said, we have no idea what we're getting into. But they lost that argument, and Clinton expanded NATO, or NATO expanded into Hungary, Poland, and the Czech Republic. Kissinger in 2014 then, a few years later, said, quote, the West must understand that to Russia, Ukraine can never just be a foreign country. If Ukraine is to survive and thrive, Kissinger said, it must not be either side's outpost against the other. It should function as a bridge between them. So here you have, and then Zbigniew Brzezinski, Carter's advisor, said, that Ukraine should be like Finland. It should be unaffiliated. He said it should have, quote, no participation in any military alliance viewed by Moscow as directed at itself. So we've got this. And then at the same time now, yesterday, China flew 39 warplanes toward Taiwan. Because, there's this concern just in and of itself about what might happen in Ukraine and what it might mean for the European alliance and what it might mean for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and all this kind of stuff. But also, if any major country in the world starts acquiring territory that they've been claiming for a long time is actually theirs, in this case Russia and Ukraine, then China, in all probability, in my opinion, is going to step out and say, well, hey, what they just did with Ukraine, we're going to do with Taiwan. And China has been sending flights into Taiwan's air defense identification zone almost daily. So the bottom line here that I would suggest of what's actually going on is that we're moving back into a new Cold War. We're moving back into a bipolar world, where on one side you've got the United States, Europe, and some countries in South and Central America and around the world that embrace democracy as we understand it. South Africa. And then on the other side, you've got countries from tin pot dictators, in Africa and the Middle East to and whatnot to Russia and China, who are saying, no, democracy isn't the best system. Instead, what we should have is essentially strongman authoritarianism that takes care of the people. Keep in mind, China now, where, if you speak out against the government, you go to prison, nonetheless has a larger middle class than the entire population of the United States. So their argument is, hey, our system works better than yours. And so we're back to, and that was the existential battle during the Cold War, for those of you not old enough to remember it. I mean, there's a lot of people listening to this program right now who literally were not born until after the Cold War was over. But there was a time when basically what was going on was a battle of ideas. You had Russia and China, and this was, arguably what the Vietnam War was about. You had Russia and China and a few other countries, Cambodia, Laos, saying, we're going to go with authoritarianism. Cuba, we're going to go with authoritarianism. And then you had Western countries saying, no, we're going to go with, the majority rules, democracy. So we had this battle of ideas. I think that's emerging again. In fact, I think we're there, and nobody's acknowledging it. And the failure to acknowledge that could lead to war, and that's what concerns me the most.